Hello everyone, this is Marc Sabatella from Mastering MuseScore, and welcome to the MuseScore Café. This is my regular series I do on Wednesdays where we talk about some aspect of making music using MuseScore. And we usually have a particular theme that we're talking about for the day and kind of explore that. And you've got the chat here, so definitely feel free to be checking in. Let me know you're here, where you're from. And this is the third Wednesday of this month, and so we are continuing with this sort of a theme that I've been doing for the last year or two, actually, of having a particular score. And rather than like saying, well, we're just going to talk about one topic like dynamics or something on a given day, we're going to look at everything involved with that score. And so also in conjunction with the fact that we're kind of running this Braille study group here in the community, I'm going to be entering a score. I'm not going to be actually using Braille necessarily, but I will be talking about accessibility features. And in particular, I'm going to enter everything that I do using keyboard only. I'm going to endeavor not to use the mouse and make sure that I'm accurately describing everything that I'm doing. So that's my goal here. And actually, one thing that I'm seeing here is my fancy keyboard logger thing is not currently showing you my keystrokes. And so let's get that running again. I somehow managed to get that not working. So let me get it working again. Give me a moment. And what I'm going to do here is, because we're going to be focused on a little bit of a back to basics as far as this goes, what I'm going to do is pick a relatively simple score to use as our example to make sure that, I don't get too bogged down in a lot of details, but to make sure we can do the basic things we want to do with keystrokes only. And the thing is, I'm always talking about keyboard shortcuts because, I'm a huge fan of keyboard shortcuts. That's why they're called shortcuts. They help you get jobs done faster. So there's any number of things. For instance, okay, right there. I already didn't do what I want to do. Let's open a score. I've got MuseScore open here, and I want to open a score using keyboard only. So what I'm going to do is press tab until I get to the score that I want to open, or at least till I get to the score area. And then I'm going to use the cursor keys to find the one that I want to open, which is this guy here, Hot Cross Buns. I also want to this little bit of window manipulation to visually lay out things the way I want. I'm gonna drag. But yeah, everything I do with the score itself, I'm going to try to do with keyboard only. All right, so this is the score we're going to enter, and it's quite simple, at least to begin with, and then we'll jump around maybe a little bit and deal with some of the more complicated aspects of this score. But also, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to add some markings that I don't really have already. I just entered this for my own benefit. It's an arrangement I created of Hot Cross Buns. A couple people have, I'm sure some of you have heard me play this before, just because I want to do this for fun, to be able to play Hot Cross Buns as a recorded duet with the basic soprano part that every third grader learns and a fancy alto part that I've been practicing and still can't quite play, but I'm getting closer and closer and closer to. But I haven't added articulations and so forth like that. So we're going to look at that, and we're going to look at it in the context of maybe experimenting a little bit. So rather than the way these sessions often go, these score of the month sessions where I'm just copying something that's already finished, here I'm going to be maybe experimenting a little bit, and you'll get to see what experimenting looks like with keyboard only. All right, so what I'm not going to do is turn on my screen reader, only because it's just too distracting to hear the computer voice while I'm trying to talk and do things. So I'm just going to try to narrate as best as I can. So all that said, let me first just hit the play button on this score so you can tell what we're actually dealing with. And so I'm going to press space. Is my cursor, is my focus on that window? I think it is. So this is the soprano part. And then, as we'll hear, it's a duet. right? There's an alto recorder part as well. I'm going to press space again to pause the playback there. But what I'm going to do next is I'm going to jump ahead a little bit because I want you to hear the end portion so that we can get a better sense of what's eventually coming up in this score. And so I have to think about this for a moment. I know how I would scroll to get there. But let's say that we're trying to do this with keyboard and we're trying to get to the end and maybe back up a little bit. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use Control End, or if you don't have a physical end key, that's Control FN right. And that will select the very last element of the score, which is in this case the final bar line. And so if you've got your screen reader enabled, it will tell you that this is a final bar line in measure 33. It's actually like the bar line. I think it's actually bar 32, and it's it's reporting it as if it was the start of bar 33. So what I want to do next is I need to get back, say I'm going to go back 4 measures. All right. So I'm going to try right now to press Control Left, because Control Left will normally move left 1 measure at a time. To be honest, I'm not sure what happens if I do that with a bar line selected. It appears that Control Left doesn't do anything with the bar line selected. So here's what I got to do. I'm going to hit Alt Left, and that puts me on an actual note. Now I can hit Control Left, and it moves to the beginning of that measure. And so that note that it put me on was the last note of the piece, and then this is the first note of the last measure. And now Control Left again goes back another measure. Control Left again goes back another measure. And Control Left again goes back another measure. So if your screen reader was enabled, you'd hear it reading that this is measure 29, and you'd be able to do the math and say, hey, yes, I have successfully gone back 4 measures. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to press play to play the score here. But before I do that, I do want to point out something else. When I used Control End to move to the end of the score and it selected the final bar line, it selected the bar line in the bottom staff. It's literally the last element of the score, and bar lines are kind of separate for each staff. So right now, I'm actually on the bottom staff, and your screen reader would be reading that as well. It would say staff 2, which is fine. I just want you to know that that's where the cursor is right now. But when I press play, because I have a single note selected, it is going to play both staves. So let's hear the last 4 bars now. I'll press space. There you go. So that is how complex the piece eventually gets. And as I said, I can kind of play this thing. Okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you how to get back there. So what I'm going to do is press Control Left again. And where did this put me? Oh, so when I played the piece, this is an important point that a couple of you have brought up. Where after playback, it doesn't change the selection. I was in measure 29. After playing back to the end of the score, the selection is still in measure 29. So when I pressed Control Left, it actually went back to 28. I want to go back to 29 now, so I'll press Control Right. And now I'm in measure 29. But I'm on the bottom staff, staff 2 still. So if I want to select I want to move up to the top staff only. I want to play the top staff only. So I'm going to use the shortcut to move up a staff. It'll either move up a staff or a voice. And as we'll discover, there's only one voice here. So I'm going to press my up shortcut, which is Alt up is the shortcut to move up and down throughout your score. Control End. So yeah, if you have a home and an end key, Control Home moves to the beginning, Control End moves to the end. And if you don't have a physical end key, again, it's usually there's an FN key or some similarly labeled key on your keyboard. That plus the right cursor is the same as end on almost all keyboards that don't have an end key. In fact, even if it does have an end key, that shortcut usually works. All right, so right now I have the top staff note in measure 29 selected because I pressed Alt up to go up. And on my keyboard, Alt up on my keyboard is actually reserved. It's like my operating system says, oh, you pressed Alt up? I want that to be page up. Which I wish I could turn off, but I can't. So I had to customize my shortcuts. So you may have seen on screen a square bracket. That is my custom shortcut for up and down. Instead of Alt up and Alt down, I use the left and right square brackets. And I kind of like it. It's one key. It's a nice little navigation key. So I think it's kind of convenient. So anyhow, I now have a note in measure 29 selected. But if I want to solo that staff, what I'm going to do is select the whole measure. So instead of just that note, I'm now going to press Shift Control Right. Control Right moves the cursor to the next measure, but holding Shift will select while it does it. So there you go. So when I press Shift Control Right, I now have that full measure selected. What this is going to do, as long as you have a full measure or actually any type of range selected, and again, a screen reader should be reporting to you if you've made a range selection that is in fact what you've done. When you have a range selected, MuseScore will only play the instruments that are part of that range. So what I should find now is when I press play, it's going to play that top staff only. And I'm just doing that so I can have fun and play the recorder for a moment, and then we'll start entering the notes. But it's fun. Trust me. It's fun for me anyhow. All right, so that was a little rough because I had to start in the middle of it, and I'm trying to press things. I had to, be clicking things on my keyboard while playing the recorder. But anyhow, as you can see, I'm kind of getting close to playing that thing at that tempo. And James, you're absolutely right. It's important to note that when you're in note input mode, there is no such thing as selection. You can't make any type of range selection in note input mode. This is quite deliberate. When you're in note input mode, there is always only a single note selected. There is no way of making a range selection. So that's not just a keyboard limitation. It's a sort of deliberate user interface limitation to make sure when you're in note input mode, you're really working on one note at a time. So that's kind of the idea. It would be possible to design an interface where range selection still had meaning in note input mode. But anyhow, all right, so what I want to do now is go back to the beginning of the score. So I'll press Control Home or Control FN left, and that moves me now to the first element of the score, which is the left bar line at the beginning of the top staff of measure 1. So here I am now, and next I want to get to a new score, so this is a duet for 2 recorders. So I've already opened a new window, I think, so I'm actually just going to Alt-Tab to get to that window. Or have I not? Oh, no, I closed it because I needed to return on my keyboard thing. So I'm going to press Control N now, letter N. Control N is the shortcut to create a new score. So I press Control N, and I will now be able to create a new score. So this dialog, the Create New Score dialog, is frankly the worst thing accessibility-wise in MuseScore, the worst thing keyboard access-wise in MuseScore, or at least it's up there. So I've got a whole tutorial where I talk just about, from an accessibility perspective, how to do that, how to work this dialog. But rather than go through everything right now, I'm going to at least go through the process of creating this score. So right now, I'm on a tab that says Create from Template. Well, I don't want to create from a template. I want to choose my own instruments. So what I'm going to need to do is press the cursor, the left cursor, to get to Choose Instruments, and then press space to select that. And now the Choose Instruments tab is selected. And what I need to do next is get some recorders into my score. So there is a search box, and it's in the second column. This dialog has 3 columns. So I'm going to press Tab, which moves me to the first column, and then Tab again, which moves me to the second column. And it's a search box. And I can type recorder into that search box. And then I can press the down arrow to start moving through the list of search results. So there's an alto recorder. I'll press space to select that because I want one of those. And then I'll keep pressing the down arrow until I hit soprano recorder and press space to select that as well. Now, when I say select it, it's important to realize, and this is a common point of confusion, we're not really selecting it in that list. What we're doing is adding it to your score, meaning it shows up in the third list. So if I press tab again, actually that just tabs to a button. That's the add to score button. But since I already pressed space, I've already done that. But that's a button mostly there for people who want to click it with a mouse. So tab to the third column, and now I can use the up and down arrows to move through the list of instruments and find out there's a soprano and an alto. What you'll notice, perhaps, is I added the alto first and then the soprano because in the search results, they came up in alphabetical order. An alto comes before soprano alphabetically, but MuseScore is smart enough to, when you actually add to your score, to put the soprano on the top. So it has done that. So I now have a soprano and alto recorder, and I'm going to press tab now to move to the bottom row of buttons. And here is where another one of these sort of confusing things to get used to about MuseScore if you haven't used other applications that do this. If I'm now on the cancel button, if I press tab again, it doesn't move me to the next button. It moves me back up to the top of the dialog. I'm going to press shift tab to get back to the cancel button. And instead, I'm going to press the right cursor key. So anytime there's a button box in a dialog like cancel and OK, tab will get you to that button box, but then you'll need the cursor keys to move through that button box. The idea is to make complex dialogues faster to take a tour through, but it does mean you got to think a little bit. And, there's room for refinement there. We have feedback in both directions about that. And this dialogue is being considered for some redesign. But in any case, I'm on the cancel dialogue. I'm now going to hit the right cursor key to move to next, press space to press it. And now I have a dialog where I can select all sorts of useful information like key and time signature. So let's do that. Press tab to get to the key signature. Press enter to, whoa, what am I doing? Somehow I've lost keyboard control here. Well, that's curious. No? Did I accidentally click somewhere? Okay, I accidentally brushed the touchpad, so my cursor, my keyboard focus was not in the dialog at all anymore. All right, so I'm now in the key signature selector, and it's got selected major as opposed to minor, which is what I want. So now I'll tab, and I want to get to G major because that's what this thing is in. Press space to select it, and then I can press escape to close that little thing. Now I can press tab. Wow, it's just interesting. It's every once in a while I'm losing focus in here, and I'm not sure why, but I'm not going to worry about it. Time signature 4/4, that's what I want, so I'm going to keep that. Tempo 120. Well, heck, I don't remember what the tempo is supposed to be. So let me pull up. I've got the PDF visible here. It should be 88 is what I want. So I'll press space to activate this. And again, having focus issues. I think. There we go. I want to show the tempo marking on my score, so I'm going to check that dialog box, and then I can tab to where the controls are. There's a quarter note already selected, so I'm happy with that. And then tab into the spin box for the tempo and type 88. And now I can press escape, and I got that. And then the next thing that I would come to if I cursor over to it is where you select how many measures. And typically I tell people, I don't know how many measures my score is going to be because I'm just starting to compose it, or I haven't counted the measures. In this case, I know it's supposed to be 32 bars, and the default is 32 bars, so I'm happy. All right. Let me move my pinned PDF out of the way of the chat so that I can do that. So there you go. Oh, and Steinar, enter to confirm a selection. Yeah, I think in this particular dialog, enter does that as well. But I know escape closes the thing also. There's probably, and the thing is, different keyboards will respond differently. And so you get to experiment with that. But yes, the arrow keys are definitely what move through between key signature, time signature, tempo, and measures. And then tab gets you down to the next area there, which is where you type the title. So I'll type hot cross buns. Again, if I press tab now, it's going to take me down to the button box. So, okay, good information that enter doesn't work in the key signature thing. I can't remember if I've ever tried it before. I'm just used to pressing escape. So when I pressed tab after the title, it took me down to the button box. Well, I don't want that. I'm going to press shift tab to get back to the title. And instead, I'm going to use down arrow. So again, you're going to get used to, you want to get used to the fact that in MuseScore, tab moves you between areas, between groups in a dialog, and then the cursor keys move within the fields there. This particular dialog probably should not have been set up that way. We've gotten a lot of feedback about that, and probably it's going to be redesigned. But in any case, just know that that is how it works. So I'm now in the composer field, and I don't know who actually wrote the thing, but I'll put arranged Marc Sabatella here. And then and then I'll press, I press tab again, habit, down arrow to subtitle. I don't want one of those. I say I don't want one of those subtitles, but there's a default subtitle already entered in there. So what I need to do is press space and then backspace just to get rid of the word subtitle. So my score doesn't say subtitle right underneath the title. That's a little thing you might want to be aware of. So down arrow again, lyricist is blank, copyright. I talked about my thing, but I have no copyright message for this score. But if you want to know how to enter copyright symbols, you can check out the article I posted in my newsletter yesterday and posted to the community about the various different ways of getting copyright symbols into this thing. So I'm done now with all that information. So I can press tab to get to the button box and then cursor over to the done button and press enter to create it. And now I have my score set up, ready to start entering some notes. So when I do that, I'm now going to move. I got to keep finding where the best place is to move this PDF viewer so it's out of the way of my score. I think maybe the top right is out of the way of the score and the chat. That's how I'm going to do it. So when I will now press Alt-Tab to return focus to my new score. When you create a new score, nothing is selected. And you can use Control-Home to select the beginning, Control-N to select the end. You know, you can do all these shortcuts that move you around. But I know the first thing I want to do is start entering notes. So let's start entering notes. I'm just going to press N. And MuseScore is smart enough to know, oh, you probably want to enter notes starting at the top left-hand corner. So when I press N right now, it puts me in note input mode in measure 1. So now I can start entering my notes. And if you know hot cross buns, now I'll play my soprano recorder. Those are the notes. So I'm going to enter those notes. So it's a quarter note, B. So I'm going to press, so the shortcuts for the durations, if you haven't used these, and these are ones I use all the time, but I know a lot of people are used to clicking these things, but I want to make sure I say this, you know, that I'm explicit about this. The number keys on your keyboard will work to set the duration. And the way I usually think about how to remember which number is which is 4, 5, 6 is eighth, quarter, half. Those are, you know, the most common durations that you might use in most pieces, eighths, quarters, and halves, and certainly it's the most common in this piece. Eighth, quarter, half, 4, 5, 6. 4, 5, 6 is the middle row of a numeric keypad. My keyboard doesn't happen to have a numeric keypad, but still 4, 5, 6, you know, I've used phones before. I still have a mental image of 4, 5, 6 being the middle, right? So 4, 5, 6 is eighth, quarter, half. I want quarter, so that's 5. So 5 for quarter, and now I can type a B. Now, when I enter that B, MuseScore picks an octave for me, and it's going to pick an octave that's somewhere on the staff. So it doesn't, by default, put you with ledger lines. If that had not been the correct octave, I would use control down to move it down an octave, control it up again to move it up an octave, control up to move another octave, etc. So, but the octave that I entered it in is correct. Now, this came up also in the Braille discussion group, and since we have a couple people here who maybe might know some things, I'm going to ask this. The soprano recorder sounds an octave higher than written, right? I mean, that B right there is written on the middle line of a staff, of a treble clef staff, which is normally B4. But a soprano recorder is the size of a piccolo. It sounds an octave higher. So it sounds like B5. My question is, if you're doing that in Braille, what do you put in for the octave sign? Do you put in octave 5? Or do you put in octave 4 because that's how it's written in print music? I'm really curious about that. But in any case, octave 4 is what I want here, middle line of the staff, so I'm all good. So it's going to say pitch B5. Your screen reader will read pitch B5 because the clef that is being used in this score is the special treble clef with an 8 above its staff. So even though it looks like B4, that middle line looks like B4 because the clef is the treble, is the so-called octave clef. It sounds like B5 anyhow. So the status bar and the screen reader will report B5. All right, I'm going to enter some more notes. I've already selected my duration of quarter, so I can now enter another quarter note just by typing the letter name, A. And very much like how Braille works, where if you just enter notes and it's the closest one, it will, it works the same way with MuseScore. It's going to pick the closest one. So if I type B and then I type A, it's going to say, hey, I'm going to pick that A below because it's the closest one, which is also the way you normally think in Braille. So now I need a half note G. Well, remember 4, 5, 6 is eighth quarter half. So 6 for half note G. And now I've got my G half note. Now, the next measure is identical to the first measure. So if I wanted, I could get all fancy and leave note input mode and select that measure and press the R key to repeat that measure. But that's going to take me more keystrokes than just re-entering that measure. I'm going to show that process of selecting and repeating things in a moment, because that entire 4-bar phrase is going to repeat over and over again. But let's first just re-enter those notes. So I'll press 5. And then again, B, and it's still all moving, small intervals. So the closest octave is the one I want, and that's what it's given me. So now I type A, and then 6, G. Now I need some eighth notes. So 4, G, 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 and then A, and then 5 for quarter note, B, A, 6 for half note, G. So I have now entered that first phrase. All right, I'm happy with myself for doing this. I'm going to press escape and save this file because usually when I do these demonstrations, I forget to save. So don't do that. Don't forget to save your file. So Control S will let me save the file. And so this will pop up a file dialog, and the details of how that file dialog work are, different for every operating system, but it should be one that feels familiar to you. If you're on Mac, it should basically be a standard Mac dialog. If on Windows, it'll be a standard Windows dialog. I'm on a Chromebook running Linux, and so it's the GTK dialog, whatever it is. So I'm just going to get to a place where I want to save this thing. So I'll put it in my Mastering MuseScore, and I'll put it in the community folder and hit the save button. All right, so now it is saved. Now, when I did that, the last note, when I entered all those notes and then pressed escape, it still has that last note selected. And James, I see that you're saying since there's an octave clef, show sounding pitch. So that's good information. If I hadn't, because recorder music doesn't always show the octave clef. MuseScore does that by default, but you can certainly set MuseScore up to treat the recorder as a transposing instrument, so it literally sounds an octave higher than written. And in that case, there wouldn't be an octave clef. And I wonder, does it really, really make sense to braille it differently? depending on that. It seems odd to me, but whatever. I'm not the one who's reading this normally. So okay, I've entered those first 4 bars. And what I mentioned before is I want to show you about using the R key to repeat a selection. So let's do that. I'm going to repeat these 4 bars. I haven't entered any articulations yet, so I'm not sure that I really want to repeat them. But yeah, let's do that, because I know it's pretty common in a lot of music to only show articulations for the first time something occurs, and then after that, just sort of expect that people will know, keep using the same articulations. You can put in the word simile to indicate that. So I'm going to repeat these 4 measures the way they are, and then I can add other markings later. So that G is selected. That last note G is selected. So if I press Shift, Control, Home, that will select to the beginning of the score. I now have those first 4 measures selected. I can now press R, and that will make another copy of those 4 measures. Press R again, makes another copy, another copy, another copy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If I do it often enough, I get to the end of the score. In fact, yeah, and so I've gotten to the end of the score now. I think if I press R again, it just doesn't do anything. Yeah, it doesn't like add more measures for you. So I've now made a copy of those first 4 measures through the entire 32 bars, which is what happens. That is all the soprano part does here. The alto part is going to do all sorts of interesting, fancy things. So I got that done. I want to return, make sure my focus is back at the beginning. So Control, Home again to get me back to the beginning. And I want to now deal with some of the other markings. There's the tempo marking is already there because I entered it in the wizard, but I have a dynamic marking of MF. So let's look at doing that with keyboard alone. I am now, so right now, I after doing Control Home, the focus is on the bar line at the beginning of that top staff. Alt left and Alt right. I briefly alluded to these before. Alt right will move me 1 element at a time through the score. So if I'm on the bar line, Alt right then moves me. I think I lost my focus again. Alt right, come on, get back to focus. Alt right moves me to the clef. Alt right moves me to the keyboard. I mean to the key signature. Alt right again moves me to the time signature. Alt right again moves me to the first note, B, and it plays it back, and a screen reader would be reading it for you. So I want to add a dynamic marking now for that. So yeah, about that octave clef thing, I'm also wondering, for anyone who like actually maybe has any experience teaching elementary music. My wife does, but I've never asked her, but I'll ask all of you. Is that octave clef actually really how you would put it? Because I feel like that would not be present in books for children, that we wouldn't actually write an octave clef when writing a recorder piece for 3rd graders. In professional ensembles, perhaps so, because there's so many different recorders, we want to be more explicit. But I think in elementary music, we would not actually use that octave clef. And so I still am curious about the answer in that case. I'm still curious if we change this to not use the octave clef, what the correct braille would be. Anyhow, I've got that B selected. So next I want to get the dynamic marking. So to do that, I'm going to get over to the palettes. And there's a number of ways of accessing the palettes. And I think what I'm going to do this particular time is use the search facility. I'm going to type Control and then F9, like the F9 key on your keyboard. So Control F9 takes you to the palettes panel and puts you in the search box. There's other ways of accessing the palettes, but I don't want it. Yeah, they exist and we'll use them if we need to. But I'm going to use the search here because it's often most convenient. And then I can just type MF into the search box and it will find all palette elements. Okay, before I go to the MF, I do want to respond to James. So I'm a little curious. You said the braille would show the print, but that's the point, is the print is not the sounding pitch. So in other words, if there's not an octave clef, the print is showing a middle line B, which is normally B4, but it sounds like B5. But the print is showing what appears to be a B4. So thanks, Linda, for the clarification that that wouldn't be in a typical third grade recorder book. So, so yeah, when I talk about octavos here, I'm not talking about the 8VA line that appears above the staff. I'm talking about the clef. But but in any case, if we don't use an octave clef, we've got B4, the middle line treble clef B, but sounding like B5. And I'm still a little curious what the best way to do that is in Braille. All right, so back to my palettes. I've typed MF into my search box, and now I can press Tab to move down to the results area. And then this is a little tricky to actually get into the results. I can never remember the sequence. It feels unnecessarily complicated to me, but I think if I press down arrow, nope, I press right arrow, right arrow moves me to the collapse or expand button. Now I can press down arrow to move into the palette. So the search box is going to show me, after a search, it's going to show you all the different palettes that have any matching things. Like if there had been a, I don't know, MIMF element somewhere in the palette that also matched MF, I would have, potentially multiple search results that matched. So you might have multiple palettes that contain matching search results. So up and down arrow moves you through those different matching palettes, but then you need to use left and right to get to the expand button or collapse button. Then you can hit the down arrow to enter the palette. So it's a little awkward, but that's the way it is. So anyhow, I now have my cursor on the MF and I can press spacebar and it adds it to the score. It adds it to the score and it is selected. So, see you, Marla. Great having you here. So I'm now in the score with the MF selected. And next, I want to at least think about adding some articulations. And okay, so Linda, I'm going to maybe assume that you have some experience directly relative to here. When this is usually taught, is it taught to slur these? In other words, when people learn to play hot cross buns, and I keep mentioning third grade because at least in the United States, it really is sort of it's a fairly standardized bit of curriculum. It's one of the few things in the music curriculum that is standardized to that level. Third grade is recorder grade for some reason. So do people learn ta, 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 or do they learn slurred? I think they probably learn to tongue everything. I think probably that makes sense. But so I don't think I want to enter any slurs of any or any articulations of any kind, because I feel like in the elementary recorder world, and this is a duet intended so that a skilled accompanist can accompany a class full of students playing hot cross buns. That was the idea. I wrote this duet so I could accompany an elementary school class, and you just tell the class, hey, play hot cross buns 8 times, and I'm going to play all these fancy variations for you. All right, so I don't think I want to enter any other articulations because typically hot cross buns is like one of the very first things you learn way before you've learned anything about articulation markings or anything. So I think I just want to move on to start entering that alto part. And I would say, Chantal, the palette navigation, I'm not going to claim it makes sense. It makes sense in the once you know how to do it, you can do it thing. I would still say probably it could have been designed better. That's my thing. Do instead of ta. All right. Okay, but tongue each pitch. That's good to know. All right. So let's go into the alto part now. So I've got that dynamic selected now. I'm going to press Alt-Right, and that moves me to the next note of that first staff. But what I don't want to be is, I don't want to be in that first staff anymore. I want to be the bottom staff. So I will use Alt-Down to move to the bottom staff. Alt-Down moves me to the bottom staff. So now I'm in the bottom staff, and now I want to get to measure 5, because in my arrangement here, the first 4 measures are blank for the alto recorder part. So what I'm going to do next is press Control right. 1, 2, 3, 4, measure 5. So now I'm in measure 5. Measure, and sorry, measure, what the? Oh, no, I'm not. I'm in measure 6. I pressed it too many times. I pressed it 5 times, and that put me in measure 6. So let's check out what actually happened here, because this is an important point also. MuseScore is putting as many measures onto a system as can actually fit on the page, which is often what you want. But it's not what we want here. Not what we want here. I don't want as many measures as fit on a page. I want 4 measures per line. I just want it to be that way because the piece is a 4-measure phrase repeating it over and over again. It's going to make it easier for the kids to read. It's going to make it easier for me to keep track of where I am as the accompanist. In a piece like this, we want 4 measures per line. So let's take a look at how to do that. Now, if you want to insert line breaks individually, let me make sure again I've got my focus in the right window. If I press Control left to move back into measure 4, I can press Enter, and it will enter a line break into that measure. But I don't want to have to do that every 4 bars manually. There is an automatic way to just enter line breaks every 4 bars. So I'll hit Enter again, which removes that line break. And now what I'm going to do is Control A to select all. And now I'm going to go to the Format menu. Alt-O takes me to the Format menu. And then I will cursor down to where it says Add Remove System Breaks. And now I can press Enter, and it opens up a dialog. The default choice there is to break systems every 4 measures, which is exactly what I want. There's a few other options there to do other things, but that's what I want. So now I can press Tab until I get to my button box, and it's on Cancel. But if I press the right arrow, it moves me to OK. And now I can press Enter, and it is now entered line breaks every 4 bars. So there we go. So next I want to get back to where I was. So if right now I have the whole score selected because I did that Control A. So I've sort of lost my sense of where I was as far as the cursor. So I'm going to have to get back there. But Linda, so this is a good question for Mac users because unfortunately I don't know the answer. Alt normally translates to Option. But I'm told that Mac programs typically work differently. Alt letter name to open a menu is absolutely standard across all Windows programs, all Linux programs. All Windows programs, all Linux programs use like Alt F to get to the File menu, Alt E to get to the Edit menu, Alt V to get to the View menu. That's standardized across every single application on Windows, every single application on Linux. But Mac, I'm told, works differently, and I never remember because I don't have a Mac to play with. I never remember how it works. So maybe someone could tell me. So even though Alt is normally Option, I don't know if Option O will open the Format menu or not. You can try it and let me know. Or maybe someone else who has a Mac who knows this stuff better can tell me, how do you normally open Windows on Mac with a keyboard? But on Windows, it's always, or on Linux, it's always Alt and a letter. All right, so I've got the full score selected right now, and really I want to get to measure, I just want to jump to measure 5. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to use the jump to measure 5 command. No, there's not a single command for jump to measure 5. There's a find command. Control F is the find command. And so when I press Control F, it opens up a little dialog box. It says find or go to, and here I can type a number. It'll jump to that measure, or I can type a letter and it will jump to that rehearsal letter, or I can type P, the letter P, and a number. It'll jump to that page. So it's a way of jumping to particular locations. So I want to jump to measure 5, so I'll just type 5 into the search box, and it selects the top staff, measure 5. So the search box has now done its job, and I'll press Escape to close the search box. The measure is still selected. Pressing Escape is just closing the search box. So at this point, I've got the top staff selected of the of measure 5. I want to be in the bottom staff. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to press N to go to node input mode, and that'll put me in node input mode on that top staff. And now Alt down moves me down. So now I'm on the bottom staff, and again, screen reader will be reading all of this. So now I can enter my alto notes, which is the same exact pattern of quarter, quarter, half, quarter, quarter, half, but different pitches. So I will type 5 for quarter note, D, and then C, 6, B. 5 for quarter again, D, C, 6, B. And then I chose to have this arrangement not have the alto part play all the eighth notes. I just chose it to have eighth notes. I mean, a half note here. So I have 6, B, and then C, and then quarter, D, C, and then a dotted quarter. So 5, period, to enter a dotted quarter. So 5, period, and then type my B. So I'm making sure that I haven't lost anything here, and I don't think I have, but I haven't seen any answers in the chat about Alt on Mac and the menu thing, so I'd certainly love it if someone could chime in with a some sort of response about that, because I wish I remembered. I wish I could remember how to work the Mac, how to work menus on the Mac. Okay, so I entered bum, bum, bum. The next thing I want is an eighth note C. So 4C. Now, I'm just going to keep entering some notes here because we're getting to use a couple more shortcuts on this next line. It's a quarter note. Oh, I need to, again, I keep changing my focus when I flip over to my PDF viewer. So 5 for quarter note, and then D, F sharp, and then eighth notes. So 4, G, D, G, quarter note, so 5, G, and it didn't enter the right octave. Yes, I know I'm singing it 2 octaves lower because, you know, I can't sing that octave. But I wanted ba-da-dum, and I got ba-da-dum. So just like with how Braille notes work, as long as you're just moving by steps or thirds, MuseScore is always going to pick the closest one. But when you get to the realms of fourths and fifths, now it's a little trickier. And that leap, G, D, G, should have been a leap down of a fifth. And that's not as, that's a bigger leap than the up a fourth. So MuseScore picks the up a fourth by default. So this is the first time I've needed to change the default octave. So I will press Control down to move that down an octave. Now I can type D for the next measure, and here again, it's supposed to be back up an octave, so I need Control up again. And then F sharp, and then 4, G, D, and then 5, G, down an octave with Control down. And now more quarter notes. B, D. The next thing I need is a C sharp. And I'm copying this from a PDF, right? So if you're following along here but not, you know, looking at the screen, I'm telling you what notes I want to enter, but it's based on me copying from a PDF. I need to enter a C sharp. So the way to enter sharps, the shortcuts for the accidentals, minus for flat, plus for sharp, equals for natural. This is new with MuseScore 4. MuseScore 3 and earlier always had the ability. And again, I'm getting a little nervous that I've lost my connection because there's no activity in the chat that I'm seeing. So I would love to someone at least say, sorry, I don't know the answer about the Mac question, but you're still live. But as far as I can tell, I still am. Thank you, Joanne. Okay, so I want to enter the C sharp. And so as I was starting to say, MuseScore 3 and earlier did not have default shortcuts for the accidentals. And it's not that it lacked the ability to have them, it just didn't have default shortcuts because no one could decide what they should be. So this is one of the things, and the problem is that all the things that you might think make sense to be shortcuts for flat, sharp, and natural, actually they're already taken. Like flat, could it be F? Well, no, F has got to be the note F. Well, what about Control F? Well, Control F might be available. I can't remember now, but Control S for sharp would be safe, right? And none of the combinations always work for everything. For flat, sharp, or B to be a flat sign, we would enter a note B, right? So unfortunately, we couldn't find a combination that just worked with everything, so we never had default shortcuts. As of MuseScore 4, it was finally decided, you know what, maybe some of the old default shortcuts can change. And so the decision was made, let's have shortcuts for accidentals. And they're going to be minus for flat, plus for sharp, equals for natural, which makes, some amount of intuitive sense. The thing that we had a sacrifice for that is that plus used to be the shortcut for a tie. Well, now T is the shortcut for tie, which goes along with S being the shortcut for slur. It's not a bad change. I've gotten used to it, and I'm now happy for it. So in any case, that's one of a small handful of shortcuts that have changed between MuseScore 3 and 4. Tie has changed from plus to T. So, in getting used, if you're moving from MuseScore 3 to MuseScore 4, most of your keyboard shortcuts still work exactly the same. That's one of the few ones that differs. But of course, the whole navigation of the interface is very different. But keyboard shortcut-wise is almost identical. Chantel, access menus with VoiceOver. Yeah, VoiceOver has its own special way of doing things. Control F2 to get to the menu. Also, you use Control F2 to move. Control F2 moves you to the menu, and then you kind of cursor through it. Yeah, that makes sense. So James is absolutely pointing out the thing that I was always in the habit of doing. So if I wanted to enter a C sharp, I could type C and then press the up arrow, and it will give me a C sharp. So that is absolutely the case. This works, except when it doesn't. Like if I wanted a B sharp, if I type B and press the up arrow, MuseScore is going to be like, oh, you meant C, right? So there's certain things, courtesy accidentals, like, if I wanted to explicitly enter a C natural in the next measure, there's no combination of ups or downs that will give me a C natural in the next measure. So yeah, up and down arrow to change the pitch of a note. Up will change the pitch and spell with sharps. Down will change the pitch and spell with flats. But yeah, there will be some things you can't get to that way. So I'm still in the habit of using up and down all the time. But J, absolutely. Yeah, so you're absolutely right, James. So if I've now entered that C sharp and decided, you know what, I really wanted that to be B double sharp or D flat, I can press J. J will respell that note. So it changed it from C sharp to D flat. I guess B double sharp doesn't cycle through with J, so you're still on your own for B double sharp. But in any case, so up and down arrow, and then J absolutely will get you the thing. But I'm just going to undo all that for a moment and come back to using the plus thing. So if I type plus C, I get my C sharp directly. So, and that, again, will then work for courtesy accidentals. If the next measure had a C natural, then equals C would give me that C natural, and is really the only way to do it. Well, the only way keyboard. So I got my C sharp, and now E, and then D, F sharp, and then a dotted quarter, so 5 dot G. Now I need some 16th notes. We haven't had any 16th notes yet. So 4, 5, 6 was 8th quarter half. You can see the pattern, right? 4, 5, 6. Larger numbers are longer durations. Well, a 16th is the next shorter duration from 8th. So the next smaller number than 4 is 3. 3 is the shortcut for 16ths. So I type 3 and then B. Oops, I wanted B. I wanted an octave lower. So I drop it an octave and then A. And now I need a dotted quarter. 5 dot G. And then some more 16ths, G, A, dotted quarter, 5 dot B, and then more 16ths, A, B, and then dotted quarter, 5 dot C, and then 16th, B, C, and then 5 dot plus C sharp. So now I need my C natural, so I'm just going to enter equals C. Whoops, I forgot to change to 16th note. Well, that's good because I hadn't made any mistakes yet. Mistakes, really easy. So I accidentally entered that C natural as another dotted quarter, and so it gave me an 8th tied over the bar line. Control Z is my handy undo, right? Or whatever it is on Mac. I imagine it's Command Z, is the universal undo shortcut. So that undoes that, and now I can type 3 for 16th note, and then equals C. Whoops, what did I do? Oh, when I did the undo, This is a little tricky thing. Yeah, J is to respell. Absolutely, Joanne. That's you've understood that correctly. So what just happened there is when I had typed equals and then C, and it entered a C natural, and then I undid that. When I undid that, it actually restored the natural sign, but then when I pressed equals, it turned it off again, and so it entered another C sharp. So I heard that from hearing it enter the wrong pitch. I also saw it on screen. If you have a screen reader, it would have also read the pitch, and you would have realized, hey, something went wrong here. So I need to make sure that I press equals again, because equals is a toggle. If we watch the toolbar, when I press the equal sign, the natural sign gets selected, press it again, gets unselected, selected, unselected, etc. So I want to make sure the natural sign is selected, type my 3, type my C, and if it gives you the wrong pitch, use up and down to fix it. And now I want my plus C sharp, and now some eighth notes, so 4, D, B, and then 5, E, and then eighth notes, 4, and then C sharp is plus C sharp, B, and then 5 for quarter note, and then 5 for D, and then I want F sharp down an octave, so control down, and then G as an eighth note, so 4G, and then B, and now here's one of those courtesy accidentals. So Chantal, is there a situation where it's preferable? It's personal choice. It's really personal choice. There's no specific reason. It more has to do with your mindset when you're entering the music and so forth, whether you're trying to correct an error, whether you're copying something where you already know the right spelling, or whether you're still sort of sounding it out in your head. But the one situation where absolutely J is not going to do give you the answer is this one where I'm looking at right now. The previous measure was ba-do-dum, C sharp, B, A. Then this measure is D, F sharp, G, B, C natural, C sharp. That C natural is a courtesy natural, right? By the way, that's a thing in Braille, yes? Courtesy naturals. In case anyone's not familiar with the concept, the bar line officially canceled that C sharp from the previous measure, but you don't want to depend on people remembering that. It's bad form. It's going to lead to reading errors. So we want an explicit natural sign on this C here in whatever this is, bar 13, 14, 15, in bar 16. I want an explicit C natural. Even though it's in the key signature already, I need an explicit natural. So there's no way around using the shortcuts for that. Equals to make sure I get a natural sign, and then a C, and then I can just type another C and press the up arrow, and it's a C sharp. So that's all that, right? So, great. And by the way, the thing about brackets is it's the subject of religious wars in the print music world, but the modern standard is to not put ordinary courtesy accidentals in brackets, because it just takes up space and increases clutter. And in music that's already highly chromatic and there's a lot of accidentals in it, that clutter gets really cluttery. In mostly diatonic music, where accidentals are less common, then putting the courtesy ones in brackets sort of made sense. But for the last 100 years or so, it's really fallen out of favor. And yet some people are really still attached to that idea of putting courtesy accidentals in brackets. And so, yeah, religious wars are fought on that subject. But in general, the modern rule is don't put courtesy accidentals in brackets for cases like that. Only do it for more unusual cases, like if you put a courtesy accidental 4 measures later, or if you put a reminder accidental in the same measure. If you have a C sharp early in the measure and then you want to remind someone it's still a C sharp later, that one goes in parentheses. Or if you have a C sharp in one octave and then you have a C in another octave and you want to remind people, hey, just because it was a C sharp down here, it's a C natural up here, that one goes in parentheses. So there's certain rules in print music for the most appropriate place for the brackets on accidentals, but again, religious wars are fought about them. Okay, so about out of time here. We've done a bunch of things, including adding some things from the palette, but and I got to fix a mistake. I didn't get to play around with articulation, so I want to just do that really quickly. So what I want to do is go back to measure 5. So Control F, and then 5 gets me back to measure 5. And now I'll just press, I can't remember with the range selection, if I press Alt down, what happens? Nothing. So I'll press N to go to note input mode, and then Alt down to go down here. And actually, I want to go 4 measures later. So Control right, Control right, Control right, Control right. This is the part that goes boo, dum, bum. Here, maybe I want some slurs. So is there a shortcut key for double dot? Not by default. It's also not on the toolbar by default. It's also not recommended at all in print music. You should almost, well, except for like double dotted 16ths, which are a thing, or double dotted eighths. Double dots are also kind of frowned upon in modern print music. But you can define a shortcut for it via the Edit Shortcuts dialog, except as I assume you realize that dialog manages to be not accessible, which is such a drag. So unfortunately, that's not possible. You can get to the note input toolbar and cursor all the way to the right, and you'll find the settings icon there, and then you can enable the double dot in your toolbar, and then you'll be able to do double dots via the toolbar. So that's a whole process that I will talk about some other time. But I just want to get some slurs in here. So I'm going to move my cursor to the G, and I want to go G, D, G, all slurred. And actually, I'm not sure. Do I want to slur it all? No, I think I want to tongue the low D. So I'm going to leave note input mode, and I have that G selected. I will press Shift right to select the number of notes I want to slur together, in this case 2, and then press S. So Shift right will extend the selection by 1 note at a time. If you only have 1 note selected and press S, it will just slur to the next note. But it's good to be in the habit of selecting the whole range. And if you want to slur 7 notes, you press Shift right to select all 7 notes, and then press S, and it will slur them all. So anyhow, there you go. So I got to enter a bunch of music in here, got to talk about a lot of keyboard shortcuts, and yeah, you got to experience some things here. So by all means, the full Mastering MuseScore course explains every last detail about using MuseScore, and I do try to make sure that I mention keyboard access as much as possible, but whenever there's questions or anything, just feel free to ask in the comments on the course or in the course community. That's the best way to learn all the details of using MuseScore. So that's been the show, and hope that people got something out of it. And I'm glad to have learned a couple more things about the Mac menus and a couple things about Braille. And so, yeah, good session for me, and hopefully you enjoyed it too. And yeah, next week we'll find some other topic to talk about. Tomorrow we'll talk about music. Music Masterclass, as always. We'll be listening to some music and seeing what we can hear about it. Talk about, theory and talk about whatnot. And so by all means, if you've got some music you've written that you want to take a look at, I don't really have a specific agenda for tomorrow. We're just going to pick some music to listen to and learn from. So go ahead and do that. Meanwhile, if you're interested in Braille music, we've been discussing lots of aspects of it, and mostly it's about people like me learning it and you all helping me, and I greatly appreciate that. But I'd like to think that some of my insights can be useful to other people, and the questions that I ask might cause people to think differently, and other people's questions that they're asking, and other people are getting to learn as well. Bottom line is, I want more people to really understand how to deal with Braille music, both how to actually read it, but also how to write it, how to convert to it, all these things. So I'm really enjoying those discussions. So thanks, everyone, and I will see you all next time.